Okay, this is a tutorial on the head assembly itself. A lot of you guys know that there's an internal clutch within inside this head. You index that head up and down, and I have fixed the cutter, and you can call me up later and ask me about the cutter, but you can see that the head works up and down. It has an internal clutch inside that head. I am going to show you right now how to adjust that clutch. You need a 3/16 Allen wrench. You put that Allen wrench on these 4 bolts. Make sure you're getting it all in the picture. You loosen up these 4 bolts in the field. You can take this off right here. Now, I would suggest either a rubber mallet or a small hammer. Okay? Use something. I got a little brass hammer here. You can see that within the picture. You can tap on this head assembly. And you can pop this cap off. By doing so, you just rolled into the clutch assembly. Okay? I'm going to show you the clutch assembly mount right here in a close-up. You'll see that there is a piece of slot right here and a lock nut, and there's 2 set screws on here. Those 2 set screws have a little friction clutch here, and they have another friction clutch inside here. No different than a clutch on a car on that worm gear. Okay? You tighten them 2 set screws up if your locking mechanism does not keep itself tight. Now, you don't have to loosen them to adjust the clutch. Now, I'm going to go back to the cutter right now and show you how to do that while you're in a hole. You're going to have to adjust this in a hole. You're not going to want to pull the whole thing out of the hole. So I'm going to show you what you need to do. Once you roll this out of the cutter down in the hole, you grab yourself a crescent wrench. You come up here on this cutter and you grab a hold of a link arm. Actually, you want to grab a hold right here. Okay? Grab a hold of your link arm. Can you see it, Anthony?
Yep.
Okay. All right. And all you got to do is take this clutch assembly and give it a nice tug. You see how I turned that right there? That just tightened that clutch up. Now, it's up to you how tight you want to get it. Okay? But when you're in that hole, you don't want to have to pull it back out. When you go to put it back on, you roll the cutter back up in the nest. You nest your bearings. You'll have to open your bearings up and nest your bearings back down inside there. You see how you got the movement on this bearing right inside here? Okay, get them all the way out and then you'll be able to pull them in. You drop your cap down on it, pop the cap in place, take your wrench and snug that down. Now, before you tighten it all the way down, run your controller a little bit to mesh the bearings and get the gear, the worm itself, to mesh. Once you do that, you tighten everything down, snug it. Your biggest thing you want to watch for, if you look on the side of this head, is that this bearing does not hang up. You see how I'm hitting right there? You take a small drift pin punch and you come on the side, you nest the bearing back into its cavity. You do the same thing on the other side. You make sure that your bearing's all the way nested. You're good to go. You tighten these screws all up. You're ready to go. You're back in the pipe. Your clutch is nice and tight within that cutter, and you're ready to go. There's a couple other pieces you need to know. As far as the end of this unit, there's a set of preload thrust bearings, and I'll show you that everything works fine. It does have an awful lot of power within this cutter. It will actually, if you hear it, that is picking the entire cutter up and down. I've done some changes to their control systems, and you're going to have to call me up so that I can tell you what I've done. I'm not going to relinquish that information on the web. I've been at it for 4 years, but I've fixed all of the older controllers so that it will handle this head. It's a very, very cheap fix. I can do it for all of you. I might be able to talk some of you through that on the phone. The biggest part of this cutter is at the end of this shaft assembly. There's a worm gear shaft that meshes with that gear inside here. Okay? The most crucial thing you see, and a lot of you have never been around this, I've repaired CNC machines my entire life. This is called a set of preload thrust bearings. Okay? Within the end of that, if you look how wide they are at the end here, and if you flip it over, how thin it is. This is called a face-to-face mount. This is called a back-to-back mount. Okay? It's like a Timken roller bearing in a car. When you put these two on there, they are designed, when you slide them on this shaft, you put a screw in the end of there, which I have right here. You put that screw and you lock that down. When you lock that down, you just made a 1/1000th preload at the end of that bearing assembly. When you slide it in the cavity, which is in the front here, it goes through the whole cutter, like so. When you slide it through this cutter and you put a cap on it and you lock that in there, you create no movement on your worm gear. Some of you guys that have been out there running that Bowman Dominator have experienced over time, because I did not have a grease zerk in the end cap. I have since put grease zerks in the end of the end caps, okay? You didn't have a way to flush that bearing. You can't get a set of preload thrust bearings with the seal on it. So I put a grease zerk so that every time you go in a pipe, you can take a lithium grease and you can pump that through there and it will clean the bearings. But once you start getting an end-to-end play, you need to change these bearings. There will be some numbers and some data on the bearings that are within that cutter. All of the special parts, this, the internal worm gear parts, the actual body parts, you got to get from me. And I'm trying to keep things reasonably priced. I'm trying to work with you guys, okay? That being said, let me jump into here a little bit. This is a mount for the Q's cutter. It's the exact same thing you got. Q's has actually got a nice cutter with that little motor assembly and everything on the outside. They really got a good motor. We got a little problem with the weight differential in the back end. I've been working with Reynolds Inliner. Reynolds has made their own counterweight system, and I'd be willing to work with anybody that wants to get into that. This mount here is for the 615, the 2000, the 2100, 2200 series, and the Tritech cutter. And then obviously you have the big mount here, which is a little bit different attachment on the back side to mount into the Bowman Dominator, because Tom made a spline setup right here to go on that gear. He actually put that spur gear right on the end of the shaft instead of using that 1/4" input. But to make a universal head, what I did is made it to where we can pull the keyway out of here. We can put this in there, and now we're right into a Bowman Dominator. So if you buy the Bowman Dominator head, if you bought that head, it will also fit the 615 to 2000, 2100, 2200 series, and the Tritech cutter. It is a universal head. The only black sheep in the whole thing is the Q's. If you buy a Q's head, it'll only fit a Q's cutter. That's it. But still, it's a good cutter head, okay? I'm going to go in to the auxiliary mount. Okay, this is a mount that hits the scissor lift head. They're both the same profile. And I didn't do nothing special, guys. I didn't make my own cutter. I didn't make my own grinder. I bought a shelf item that all of you can probably get anywhere. Ingersoll Rand, believe it or not, Ingersoll Rand, Seiko, there's an Astro. The same company is making all of those grinders. They're just changing the insignias on the side. You can get a 5,000 RPM, 2100 RPM grinder, and all I did was took the end of the grinder off. Give me just a second and I'll show you what that grinder looks like. But when I first came out, I had some problems because they did different runs. Your deck height, which I will call the height, from here to here varied between the grinders. And it was a little problem that I had because somebody wasn't getting the same power. It's supposed to be 1.9 horsepower, 27.5 CFM. What it is a deck height from here, I didn't account for the difference in it, so we were losing air across here to here on the grinder. So what I've done, I've actually got an 1/8" O-ring in here, but when you clamp that down, that O-ring seals it so it forces the air through the center of the grinder. Now if any of you buy a new grinder, you're going to have to take the mount and turn it around so the air is coming out back off the grinder. You can see it on all these. I've got the mounts and everything are out. That's all right. That everything has changed. I believe that's enough information that you need to know on the head. I could probably pull this grinder apart and let you know what it looks like inside here and some of the stuff that you need to do within that cutter. If you pull that out, there's a bearing inside there that's a sealed bearing. on one side, it's not sealed on the other. A lot of your guys in the field will run this thing and they'll throw it on the shelf. It's very, very important that before you put it in the pipe, you take the back end of that cutter and you put a little bit of oil in there. You oil your air tools in your shop. You got to oil this too. You put a little oil in there, put your line on it, run the grinder. When you get done in the pipe, a lot of guys are taking them and taking the whole grinder head and submersing the thing in oil. If you put it in the oil, the water can't destroy the components within the grinder. I've got guys out there that had a brand new grinder like this and never had to do a thing to it. It's how you treat the equipment is what makes the longevity of the equipment. Now there is some sealed bearings that you can buy. It's a stock item. You pull them out of there. I've got the numbers and everything wrote down. If you wanted to upgrade to it, if in case you got some people in the field that aren't as concerned about your purchase of that piece of equipment, all they're concerned about is a paycheck. Okay? And I've done there too. I've had to hire employees. You'll see within the end of the cut, and I'll go into the different cutting arrangements here later, I think that I've covered pretty much everything that you need to know about the grinder itself. If you're going to put it in the pipe, the one thing I can tell you that will increase the longevity of this tool more than anything is that each one of these holes that are here on this cutter, you need to fill them with Vaseline, some grease, something. When you get in there and you start cutting on that resin gets completely all over that tool, and then when you pull it out, you can't get an Allen wrench in none of them screw holes. You're drilling things out to work on it. You're just destroying it. If you fill everything with Vaseline and then spray it down with some WD-40, or I've seen guys take motorcycle grease for a chain on a motorcycle and spray it down, that resin can't stick to it. Although you got a little gooey mess when it comes back out of there, you can take some acetone, or you can go to the car wash and you can clean it up. Use something biodegradable. Everybody's got the biodegradable grease that's out there in the oil because you just shot the liner. So that being said, I think that we can go to the next video.